There are a lot of strange and sometimes frightening cases in my life. I'll tell you about one of them. About 4 years ago, when I was 16 years old, I found out after every time before going to bed several times, I checked the lock of the door. On that day, I found a friend for an overnight stay. They lived with my parents, but they left for an overnight stay with friends, so there are 3 of us at home. Me, my older brother arrived at that time was 17 years old, and my friend. My brother hung out with us for a while and went to bed, as he had to get up early in the morning. My friend and I were sitting in my room, watching YouTube and chatting. Closer to 2 o'clock in the morning, my friend began to be cloned into a son. He fell asleep very quickly, but I didn't want to sleep, and I returned to watch the views. Suddenly, there was a noise from neighboring houses. I did not attach this importance. Due to the number of neighbors' cats, he often collects coal at night to meet, and since the coal is upholstered with sheet iron, all this is accompanied by a deaf metallic ringing, just like what I then heard. Since about 5 minutes later, before a barely noticeable shadow flashed on my monitor, it happened so quickly that in any other situation, I immediately got up from my chair and went to the front door. And damn it, not one of the 2 locks was not locked. What happened next was something that almost pissed me off. Having locked both locks, I turned on the light in the yard and looked through the peephole. When I looked through the peephole in front of him was a few CKINGFACE. In surprise, I cried out damn it and jumped away from the door. Behind the door was the face of a man of 25-30 years old, who stood close to the peephole. I looked through the peephole again to see the stranger in more detail, and then he spoke. A stranger asked me to let him in, said that he needed help, but you know what was the most terrible thing? His emotions, or rather their complete absence. The stranger's words sounded very convincing. There was real fear in his voice, as if he really needed urgent help on which his life depended, but his face showed absolutely no emotions, nothing but the movement of his lips, a completely blank look. I was unrealistically creepy. I just stood and looked at him. With every second he begged to let him in even louder, with even more fear in his voice. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned around, I saw my brother, and did not even notice how the stranger fell silent, asked me, "What are you doing, brother?" I replied that someone had climbed into our yard, after which I looked through the peephole again. There was no one in front of the door. What the heck? I thought then. I told my brother that just outside the door of a man, and that I saw that he asked to let him in. He believed me, and said that he also saw someone through the window, but thought that he had met. After that, we began to turn off the lights in the house and look for a place to find a stranger, but there was no one there. Suddenly, a wild cry of my friend is heard from the room. My brother and I fly into the room and see that a man is standing at the window in the room with the same emotionless face. But his look has changed. From empty, he turned into a predator. Despite the fact that the light was on in the yard, and it was dark in the house, and he just couldn't see us, he looked straight into my eyes. I was dumbfounded with horror, and then he gives out the first and only emotion. His face stretches out. In a wide smile, he raises his hand to the level of his face. In his hand, you can see a HEALTHYKALIFEAKNIFA. Slowly bringing the knife to the window, he began to methodically tap the tip of the knife on the glass while continuing to smile terribly. At that moment, my brother was already talking to the dispatcher on this phone, calling the smart police by the dispatcher. We fled to the surveillance camera, not a normal person from us. There was no desire to stay in the room behind which this abnormal one was standing. The police arrived about 10 minutes later, but there was no one in the yard. This psycho escaped. An identikit of a stranger was found with our verbal police officers. The officers contacted the indicated superiors until they arrived. Despite the fact that orientations on this psyche were hung all over the city, he was never caught. How grateful I am to my intuition for having thought of checking the closing of the door, and to my father for his caution. There are bars in every window of our house. Who would know if they were not there?